How far would you go to motivate yourself to work out? Would you humiliate yourself if it meant losing a few pounds?
More than 60% of Americans don't have 3 days of emergency supplies, even though disaster relief can take up to 96 hours to arrive. When the grid goes down, when water stops flowing, or when roads clog with evacuees, survival isn't about luck, it's about preparation. Today, we're breaking down the 7 survival rules you must follow to stay alive, and the 4 deadly mistakes that could cost you everything. From overlooked fitness prep to the water miscalculation that kills more families than fire, to the lone wolf myth that ends in disaster. You'll see what really matters when systems fail. Let's begin with the foundation of every survival plan. The one rule that turns chaos into calm. Having a family emergency plan you can execute automatically. Rule 7. Maintain physical fitness before crisis strikes. Tom carried 40 pounds of supplies 2 blocks before his chest tightened and his vision blurred. The evacuation route was still 3 miles away. He'd spent $5,000 on gear and couldn't carry it 200 yards. This is the rule nobody wants to hear, but it might be the one that determines whether you make it out. Your body is your primary survival tool. The best stockpile in the world means nothing if you can't move it, can't lift it, can't carry your own child to safety. Recent studies from the National Institutes of Health reveal that physical fitness directly correlates with emergency response time and survival rates during building evacuations and natural disasters. The research is blunt. Physically inactive individuals require 30% longer to reach safety during fire emergencies. That delay kills. Here's what preppers overlook. The crisis doesn't wait for you to get in shape. A heart attack during month 2 of a grid down scenario isn't a medical emergency you can call 911 for. It's a death sentence. The statistics show 80% of chronic diseases are preventable through physical activity and proper nutrition. Those medications you're stockpiling, many wouldn't be necessary if you address fitness now. The standard is simple, but not easy. 60 minutes of moderate physical activity daily. Mix cardiovascular work with strength training and flexibility. Practice carrying your loaded bug-out bag for the distance you'd actually need to travel. If you're gasping after 10 minutes, you've identified a fatal weakness in your preparedness plan. The question becomes, once your body is ready, what supplies does it actually need to carry? Rule 6. Build a 72-hour kit for every household member. Sarah's family had one emergency kit. When the wildfire jumped the highway, they had 40 seconds to evacuate. Her husband grabbed the kit. Her teenage son grabbed the dog. She grabbed her daughter. Nobody grabbed food for 3 people plus a 70-pound dog. They spent 72 hours in a high school gymnasium splitting 4 protein bars 6 ways. The 72-hour standard isn't arbitrary. It's derived from decades of disaster response data showing that government aid, even when mobilized immediately, takes between 48 and 96 hours to reach affected populations. Those first 3 days, you're invisible to the system. The Federal Emergency Management Agency states it clearly. You are responsible for your own survival during that critical window. Here's what belongs in each person's kit. 1 gallon of water per person per day. That's 3 gallons per individual for a 3-day supply. Non-perishable food requiring no cooking. Protein bars, dried fruit, nuts, canned goods with pop-tops, manual can opener, first aid supplies including bandages, antibiotic ointment, pain relievers, prescription medications, flashlight with extra batteries, battery-powered or hand crank radio, whistle to signal for help, local maps since GPS fails during disruptions. The mistake most families make isn't what they pack, it's how they organize it. Each family member should have their own clearly labeled kit stored in the same accessible location near an exit. Test your kit. Actually test it. Spend a weekend living off only what's packed. Those kits assume mobility, but what happens when leaving becomes more dangerous than staying? Rule 5. Shelter in place first, evacuate only when absolutely necessary. Miguel's neighborhood Facebook group buzzed with evacuation posts when the civil unrest started downtown. 23 families loaded minivans and headed for relatives in other counties. Miguel and his wife stayed. They locked doors, closed blinds, and lived off their pantry for 11 days. When the others returned, they found looted homes, broken windows, stolen belongings. Miguel's house stood untouched. The romance of bugging out, grabbing your gear and disappearing into the wilderness saturates prepper culture. It's tactical, it's adventurous, it's also extraordinarily dangerous and usually unnecessary. Your home contains advantages you cannot replicate in a field or forest: structural shelter from weather, existing food and water supplies, familiar terrain, established medical supplies, tools, sanitation, security measures you've implemented. Real survival statistics tell an uncomfortable story. Evacuees are significantly more vulnerable than those who shelter in place during most disaster scenarios. scenarios. You're exposed on roads where you can be trapped by traffic, targeted by opportunists, or caught in secondary disasters. You're competing for limited hotel rooms, shelter space, fuel. You're burning through supplies while mobile instead of conserving them in a fortified position. Here's what sheltering in place actually requires: functional locks, reinforced entry points, window coverings that prevent observation from outside. The Red Cross recommends 2 weeks of water at home, 1 gallon per person per day. Food supplies sufficient for extended isolation, 2 weeks minimum, a month better. Survival isn't about luck, it's about preparation, so hit subscribe now and get the strategies, skills, and tools you'll need before the next crisis strikes. Now, staying requires something most people never properly stockpile, something more critical than any other supply. Rule 4. Store water first, everything else second. The Martinez family had 6 months of freeze-dried food, 17 buckets, perfectly organized, 4,500 meals. When the municipal water system failed on day 4 of the heat wave, they realized their mistake. All that food requires water to prepare. They had 12 bottles, 72 ounces. 3 days later, Mr. Martinez stood in a 4-hour line for rationed water with thousands of other people who'd made the same fundamental error. Water is the non-negotiable element of human survival. You can survive 3 weeks without food. You can survive 3 days without water. Maximum. In heat, exertion, or illness, that window shrinks to 24 hours. No amount of gear, weapons, or food matters if you're dead from dehydration on day 2. The mathematics are simple and unforgiving. 1 gallon per person per day for drinking and sanitation. A family of 4 needs 4 gallons daily. For 3 days, 12 gallons. For 2 weeks, 56 gallons. For 1 month, 120 gallons. That's meeting the minimum threshold for survival, as defined by every emergency preparedness agency worldwide. Here's what people get wrong. They store water incorrectly and it becomes unsafe. Commercially bottled water remains safe for years if unopened. But many families try to save money by filling used containers. Use food-grade plastic containers that previously held beverages, not chemicals. Wash thoroughly with dish soap and hot water. Sanitize with diluted bleach solution. Fill with clean tap water and seal tightly. Store away from direct sunlight. Replace every 6 months. Water keeps you alive. What comes next determines whether you stay healthy or watch treatable problems become fatal. Rule 3. Master basic first aid and stockpile comprehensive medical supplies. The cut on David's hand wasn't serious. A slip with a knife while opening a stubborn package. 1/4 inch deep, bled for 6 minutes. Would have been 5 stitches in normal times. But these weren't normal times. The clinic had closed. The hospital was overwhelmed. He cleaned it with water, wrapped it with a t-shirt strip, and hoped. 4 days later, the infection had spread to his wrist. 7 days later, he had sepsis. He died on day 9 from a treatable wound. Medical infrastructure fails early and spectacularly during crisis. Hospitals become overwhelmed within hours of major incidents. Staff can't reach work, supply chains break, power outages disable equipment. Your sprained ankle or infected cut isn't getting treatment. You're responsible for your own medical care until systems restore, which could be days or weeks. Basic first aid knowledge saves lives in direct proportion to how many people possess it. Every household should have at least one member trained in emergency response. The Red Cross offers community courses teaching CPR, wound care, fracture immobilization, burn treatment, and recognition of life-threatening conditions. This isn't exotic knowledge. It's practical skill that turns panic into purposeful action. Your medical stockpile should address 3 categories: acute injuries, chronic disease management, and preventive care. For acute injuries, comprehensive first aid kit including sterile bandages, gauze pads, medical tape, elastic bandages, tourniquet, trauma shears, tweezers, instant cold packs, antiseptic wipes, antibiotic ointment, burn cream. Add a blood pressure monitor and thermometer. The supplies mean nothing without knowledge. Learn to clean and dress wounds properly to prevent infection, which brings us to the preparation most people completely ignore even though it costs nothing. Rule 2. Develop your community network before you need it. Janet had everything. 2 years of food, water filtration, solar power, medical supplies, ammunition. She lived alone and spoke to her neighbors twice a year. When the grid went down for 11 days during the ice storm, she made it 4 days before the isolation broke her. No news, no contact, no idea whether the world was ending or just her block. On day 5, she walked to the neighbor's house and knocked. They'd been pooling generator fuel, sharing news from a ham radio, and taking turns on watch. They invited her in. She cried. The lone wolf fantasy pervades preparedness culture and kills people. Humans survived as a species not because we're individually impressive. We're not, but because we cooperate. We share resources, we specialize skills, we watch over each other. Strip away the infrastructure of modern society and you're left with the oldest truth. Communities survive. Individuals die. Building community networks before crisis requires overcoming the modern impulse toward privacy and isolation. Start simple. Know your neighbors' names, know their occupations, know who's elderly, who has small children, who has medical conditions. Exchange phone numbers. Exchange information about communication plans. If phones are down, where do we meet? Here's what the lone wolves miss. 3 armed families coordinating watch schedules are exponentially safer than 1 family awake 24 hours. But communities, supplies, even physical fitness, all of it fails without the foundation that comes first. Rule 1. Create a detailed plan and train your family to execute it without thinking. The fire alarm screamed at 2 in the morning. The Williams family had smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, 2 exit routes from every room, and absolutely no plan. Mom grabbed the car keys. Dad grabbed his laptop. Their 14-year-old daughter grabbed the dog. Their 11-year-old son grabbed nothing. He stood in his doorway asking what to do until his father physically carried him out. They survived. Barely. They had tens of thousands of dollars in preparedness supplies and no practice plan for the most common household emergency. The plan is not optional. The plan is not something you figure out when crisis hits. The plan is the single most important element of survival preparedness because everything else depends on execution. And execution under stress requires training that's already embedded in automatic behavior. Your family cannot make rational decisions when afraid, when rushed, when surrounded by chaos. Your family emergency plan must address multiple scenarios because different emergencies require different responses. Structure fire, immediate evacuation, designated meeting point outside, nobody goes back in for anything. Natural disaster, shelter in place locations for each scenario, communication plan if separated, supply locations everyone knows. Civil unrest, secure the house, designated safe room, communication with authorities. Extended power outage, ration management, security schedules, communication plans. Here's what separates real preparedness from collection hoarding. Practice. Monthly fire drills where you actually evacuate the house. Even perfect execution of these 7 rules can be destroyed by 4 common mistakes that turn preparation into vulnerability. Mistake 4. Relying exclusively on weapons for security. Marcus owned 19 firearms and 15,000 rounds of ammunition. His preparedness budget for 3 years, 94% weapons and ammunition, 6% everything else. When the earthquake hit and water stopped flowing, he couldn't purify contaminated water. When his daughter's appendix burst on day 6, he couldn't treat infection. When neighbors organized mutual aid, he wasn't invited because they feared him. He survived 2 weeks alone before dehydration forced him to abandon his arsenal and beg for water. The weapons-focused approach to preparedness is seductive, dramatic, and fundamentally flawed. Yes, security matters. Yes, the ability to defend yourself and family is legitimate, but security is one component of survival, not the entire strategy, and firearms alone solve precisely 0 of the daily challenges crisis creates. You can't eat bullets, you can't drink ammunition, you can't treat wounds with a rifle. The security-only mindset reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of what crisis survival actually requires. You need water, food, shelter, medical care, sanitation, community cooperation, fire starting ability, food preparation. These unglamorous necessities are what keep you alive day after day. Security protects these resources, but security without resources is just armed starvation. The practical problems with overinvestment in weapons are immediate and obvious. Money spent on firearms number 12 through 19 could have purchased 6 months of freeze-dried food, comprehensive medical supplies, water filtration systems, or solar power. The opportunity cost is survival itself. The weapons mistake is about misallocating resources. The next mistake is about choosing the wrong destination entirely. Mistake 3. Planning to bug out to the wilderness. Trevor had it all figured out. When society collapsed, he'd load his truck and head to his carefully researched wilderness location 6 hours north. 40-acre parcel with a stream, no neighbors. Perfect hunting. He'd live off the land, be self-sufficient, avoid the chaos. He arrived on day 3 of the crisis along with 16,000 other people who'd had the same idea. The parcel was occupied. The stream was contaminated with waste from upstream campers. The game was gone within days from overhunting. Trevor lasted 9 days before exposure and hunger forced him back. The bug out to wilderness fantasy is one of the most pervasive and deadly myths in preparedness culture. It sounds reasonable. Leave the chaos of cities. Escape to nature, live off the land like our ancestors. It falls apart upon contact with reality at every single point. First practical problem, you're not going alone. Thousands of others have the same plan. That pristine wilderness location you scouted, it becomes a refugee camp within 48 hours of major crisis. Second practical problem is that living off the land requires expert-level skills that take decades to develop and cannot be learned from books. Identifying edible plants versus poisonous ones. Tracking and hunting game effectively, building weather-tight shelters that don't kill you from exposure. Starting fires in wet conditions. These skills require practice measured in years, not weekend camping trips. The correct approach for the overwhelming majority of people: shelter in place. Your home contains resources you cannot replicate elsewhere. The wilderness mistake assumes isolation equals safety. The next mistake assumes the opposite, that any social connection strengthens survival. Mistake 2, broadcasting your preparedness to everyone. Jennifer posted her basement pantry tour on social media. 300 jars of home canned vegetables, 50-pound rice bags, wall-to-wall shelving. Her prepper group loved it. 1,500 likes, 200 shares. 3 weeks later, during the first night of regional power outages, someone remembered that post. 4 men kicked in her back door at 11 p.m. They knew exactly where to go. They'd studied the video. They took everything they could carry and destroyed what they couldn't. Jennifer spent the next month dependent on emergency services she'd prepared specifically to avoid. Operational security is the principle that information about your capabilities and resources should be carefully controlled. In preparedness context, it means your supplies, plans, and preparations remain private outside your immediate trusted circle. Every person who knows what you have is a potential threat during crisis. Not because people are inherently bad, but because desperate people make desperate choices. The social media trap is obvious, but people fall into it constantly. Posting photos of your preparedness supplies, discussing your plans in public forums, wearing tactical gear that advertises your mindset, displaying prepper bumper stickers, bragging about your capabilities at work or social events. Every instance broadcasts a message: this person has resources worth taking. Children present a particular operational security challenge. Young children don't understand why information should be private. They share innocently, "My daddy has lots of guns in the safe." These statements in school compromise your security completely. But even perfect operational security can't protect against the final and most dangerous mistake. Mistake 1: accumulating supplies without developing skills. Richard had $40,000 invested in preparedness supplies. His basement looked like a sporting goods store. Top-tier equipment for every scenario. Tactical gear, communications equipment, advanced medical supplies, water filtration systems, solar panels. Freeze-dried food for years. He'd never started a fire without matches, never purified water, never treated a wound beyond applying a bandage, never operated his radio equipment, never actually used his solar panels. When the ice storm knocked out power for 18 days, his expensive equipment sat idle because he didn't know how to use any of it. The fundamental error in modern preparedness culture is mistaking purchasing for preparing. Buying a water filter doesn't make you prepared. Knowing how to use it, maintain it, and troubleshoot it when it fails makes you prepared. Owning a sophisticated first aid kit doesn't save lives. Understanding wound care, recognizing medical emergencies, and remaining calm under pressure saves lives. The supplies are tools. Tools require skill to use effectively. The skill development that matters most starts with basic survival fundamentals that require zero equipment. Fire starting with primitive methods: friction, flint and steel, magnifying glass, water location and purification without modern filters, shelter construction using natural materials and basic tools, navigation without GPS using maps, compass, and natural indicators, food preservation without electricity using salt, smoking, and dehydration. These skills work regardless of whether you have your expensive gear. The medical skills gap is particularly dangerous because people assume first aid kits are self-explanatory. They're not. Proper wound cleaning prevents infection that kills. Correct tourniquet application stops bleeding without causing unnecessary tissue damage. CPR performed incorrectly is useless or harmful. The practice requirement cannot be overstated. Skills deteriorate without use. You don't learn to start fires by reading about it. Survival comes down to preparation, not luck. Follow the rules, avoid the mistakes, and you'll stay ahead when crisis strikes. If this helped, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. I've got more survival strategies coming that you won't want to miss.